Alright you guys, Jay here and welcome back to the channel. If you ever feel like you're stood alone anywhere, just know that I'm stood right beside you and I'm thinking the exact way you are thinking. A lot of us are realizing here and we know that the validators are banding together, they're creating a group to form this second sub-DAO attempt, and this is going to be another governance layer over the current L1, and they're going to vote themselves in as the members, as we're seeing. This also includes 6+ ex-Terra Rebels members. We've got people that are responsible for $3 million hacks. We've got cult leaders. We've got centralized players. And each and every one of these have a conflict of interest. And they're attempting to divert community funds to a sub-DAO treasury that they control. And effectively, we're seeing a lot of those who voted no on the original sub-DAO proposal now voting yes because they have secured themselves a seat on this secondary governance layer. So when we go and we actually look at the proposal, it's easy to misunderstand who's really on side, and as I say, who's drilling holes in the boat and who's actually bailing the water out. So what I'm going to do is get a side-by-side view up. And what we can see on the multi-signature signers for this new sub-DAO committee, which was originally rejected, we can see Lunk Goblins, Lunk Live, Juris Protocol, Vegas, Hexagon, Rexy, Nicholas Boulay, Garada, Jesus is Lord, and Renzo. And these are all going to be the signers of this secondary governance layer that comes with its own treasury. The intention is to take funds from the community pool and put them into the control of a smaller group of validators. We need to understand that a Sybil attack isn't effectively going to be this major shutdown of the chain. It's likely going to come in the form of control over the decentralized aspect. It's going to come in the form of a centralized body organizing, gaining enough voting power to establish their presence forcefully on chain. And once that presence is established, they can continue moving an inch until they begin to take a mile at a time. And they can begin to then exploit the system in various different ways. From my perspective, like I said, it's much easier to understand what is going on when you put the proposal and the voting side by side. We can see that Jesus is Lord is now a signer on this proposal. Lunk Live is now a signer on this proposal, being the second sub-DAO initiative. So how did each and one of these validators vote on the previous sub-DAO initiative? Well, each of these validators actually threw down a no with a veto, and even Community First Lunk, who's voting yes to the second sub-DAO, also voted no to the first sub-DAO. Now we can see that there is a little bit of a discrepancy here, and that validators are effectively now supporting a proposal that they vetoed previously because they wasn't part of it, are now voting yes because they are part of it. This tells us that they have a direct conflict of interest and their voting power is going where it best benefits them. So what I'm now going to do is bring all three of these up side by side so you can see exactly what's going on. We can see that the multi-signature signers are heavily voting yes. I think Vegas is the only validator to actually go and vote abstain to a proposal that he knows he has a conflict of interest supporting. Lunk Live hasn't voted at the time of this video. They are a multi-signature signer on this second sub-DAO, and they did vote no with a veto on that previous sub-DAO initiative. So this leaves us in an unusual spot. It leaves us in a position where the people who are responsible for the previous sub-DAO have actually gone out and they've worked very smartly to try to get each of those validators that were not originally on side now on side. And we can see that the previous proposal was quite outright in what it wanted to do: the establishment of a Terra Classic sub-DAO initiative aimed at organizing and decentralizing key responsibilities for the Terra Classic blockchain. This was the mile that I'm speaking about, and instead of going for the mile this time, well, they're going for the inch. They're going for the subtle title. They're not putting sub-DAO in the title. This is a phased approach to establish on-chain liquidity for USDC, and this comes in the form of a sub-DAO that has its own treasury that we're going to have to divert funds from the community pool to fund that. And once those funds go into that, they're going to be the ones responsible for spending and approving anything, period. Once the money leaves the chain, we have absolutely zero guarantees, in the same way we had zero guarantees with Terra Rebels. We had zero guarantees with Edward Kim's grant program that we diverted community funds for. We have zero guarantees just in the same way this ecosystem funded Terra Rebels and Hexagon with over $500,000 at this point that went out in value at the time. This is a situation that we've been in. Like I said, this is a seasonal takeover. It happens each and every year. The difference is this time it could pass. And the reason why I say this is if all nodes decides to themselves, we're not going to enforce that rule. We do not believe that each one of those validators, even though they're gaining a seat on a proposal that they're supporting and they're going to be in control of this new subDAO, they might not believe that there is a conflict of interest. They might just be imposing this on me as we've seen previously. What All Nodes did on this proposal was actually go ahead and voted yes. They wanted to see the establishment of this Terra Classic subDAO, and the only reason it was prevented was because Jesus is Lord voted no with his two validators, Lunklai voted no, and I voted no. And those were each no with vetoes, which pushes it to that 33% area, which is designed to prevent a hostile takeover like this from happening. Each and every one of these validators are clearly upset that they're not able to get the chain to go in the direction they would like to put it in. And instead of sitting there moaning, instead of sitting there and wondering why, they figured out the best way to do this is just to get as many of the bigger validators together, get them to band together, and then get them to effectively move towards controlling this blockchain. Everybody needs to understand that if they do create this subDAO, we are not going to be able to pry those seats of power from them. Just in the same way currently that we might not be able to prevent this hostile takeover from happening. And like I said, standing as a man alone is not easy right now. I am the only no with a veto, and the only person voting no is Moonrunners. Vegas is throwing down his abstain, which I think is responsible up until a certain point. But from my perspective, he has a responsibility to vote no with a veto because each and every one of these validators have a conflict of interest. They gain a seat of power on this subDAO committee. And again, this shouldn't been named a phased approach to establishment of on-chain liquidity. It should have been a phased approach to establish a subDAO to manage liquidity for USD on Terra Classic. It should be something along those lines. Instead, it's worded very carefully. I'm very worried. And when I say I'm very worried, I am very worried. I've been here for more than 3 years and I have watched centralized takeover after centralized takeover after centralized takeover. I think I've figured out that it's better to do things more upfront, be yourself, go back to not being an alias, and actually attempt to engineer, right, this Sybil attack, work for a long time. And if you don't believe that people would do that, I think you're wrong. I think you're wrong because this is the financial sector and our ecosystem has a lot to give. I mentioned previously that DeFi will probably be the last place in crypto where everybody flocks to, where there's still some freedom to build inside a sandbox. Our chain has a stable asset that could be restored if the right centralized body got behind it. And a centralized body, like I said, they're not going to do things mile per mile. They've attempted to go mile per mile, and they know that's not happening. They know they've got to essentially give as many people a piece of the pie that they can. And yeah, they offered me a piece of the pie, and I said no. I said this is wrong. I said you do not need a subDAO initiative to divert community funds when each and every one of these dexes can simply apply for a funding proposal through governance in the same way that we paid each and every paid per job. This is simply just people wanting to gain and garner control over the blockchain, whittle it down so they can take it in the direction that they want. We see the discrepancies. We can see that the validators who originally voted no to the first subDAO are now voting yes to this second subDAO. Something else that everybody should really think about is the fact that the proposal itself is pushing far too much for a singular proposal. They're trying to not only establish a subDAO, they're also filling all of the seats inside that singular proposal, when really what should happen is the first proposal goes up to establish the subDAO initiative, and then each proposal that is formed afterwards should be singular to the person wanting to fill the seat. Each person joining that committee board for the subDAO, for the signers, should be judged on an individual basis, not inside collectively one proposal that's establishing the DAO that they're all going to be on. But what do you think? Is Lunk Live going to vote yes in support with a direct conflict of interest? Is All Nodes going to follow up on the rule that they enforced on Lunk Dash and HCC when I effectively, supposedly, had a direct conflict of interest? And what do you think? Do each and every one of these validators have a direct conflict of interest if each and every one of them voting yes is gaining a seat on that subDAO where they will be in control? Let me know in the comments section what you think, and drop a like, subscribe, do all of those things. Really going to help us out, and I'll catch you in the next one. Ciao!